work it, don't just stop. Let me see you pop at the barbershop. Work it, cannot hold, overflows, become one. Now work it, don't just stop. Let me see you pop at the barbershop. Getting ready for the show, little soldiers in a row. Watch them closely when they go. Falling in and out of low, little soldiers in a row. You can't hate them anymore. Now strike your boots and move your body close to me. Now feel the rhythm, no surrender to the beat. Now strap your boots on, move your body close to me. Now feel the rhythm, no surrender to the beat. Work it. At the barbershop. At the barbershop. Better call the cops. At the barbershop. Now work it. Don't you stop at the barbershop. Getting ready for the show. Little soldiers in a row. Watch them closely when they go. Falling in and out of low. Little soldiers in a row. You can't hate them anymore. Now strike your boots and move your body close to me. Now feel the rhythm, no surrender to the beat. Now strap your boots and move your body close to me. Now feel the rhythm, no surrender to the beat. Now strike your boots and move your
Ребятки,
body
всем
close to
привет.
me. Now feel the rhythm, no surrender to the beat. Now strap your boots and move your body close to me. Now feel the rhythm, no surrender to the beat. Work it.
Продолжаем наши тусовочки. Фармим фронтенд мастерс. Сегодня будем проходить курс по Next.js. Introducing to Next.js. Скотт Мосс. Суперфильтр АИ. Да? Давайте посмотрим, что такое суперфильтр АИ. А что эта штука делает? Вот так вот сходу сложно понять, что это делает эта приложуха. How does work? Trust, organize, analyze and take action on emails in whatever way you decide. Типа автоответчик, да, на имейлы. If you believe you are good fit for the beta. If we believe, ну то есть типа ты им закоммится, а они, если сочтут, что ты им подходишь, да, то они тебе дадут тестовую версию. Короче, это этот Скотт Мосс. Да, пилит. И всего. Один блок у него. Это вот на чем Скотт Мосс позиционируется, да? А что он еще? Scott is the CEO and co-founder of Superfilter AI. Ну, это стартапчик, я так понял, да? He spent years as a VC investing and in AI startups. А VC это что такое? VC investing. VC investing in AI. Venture capital. Venture capital. А что такое venture capital? The top 5. Venture capital. Is a form of private equity and a type of financing for startup companies and small businesses with long-term growth potential. А где он бабки берет, чтобы быть venture capital investing? Building new features as an engineer at Netflix. And founding and leading a dev tool startup. He is a 2 times UC founder. Что такое UC founder? The UC founder. U-комбинатор. Да? То есть такой-то До сих пор не понял. В общем, что-то про инвестицию в стартапы, да? That loves building things people obsess about. Outside of the grind. Scott loves the game and play basketball and spend time with his family out in California. Так, ну давайте откроем его Twitter и GitHub. Previously investor initialized and your combinator. Elm average engineer. Ну типа average, типа средний инженер. Ну все, давай мы зафолловим. Это прикрепленный у него твит, да? Excited to say I'm the CEO and co-founder of Super Filter AI, along with как? А чуть покрупнее сделаем. Purnuдлес и Эбби Браун. Veteran Family Guy, Startup Founder, Coinbase. Eliminating Email, Super Filter AI, Fitness Travel, Early Stage Startup, Lyft. We're going to change your relationship with online communication for the better. We have some huge problems ahead of us, but we're very exciting to try and tackle them. Такая интересная тема. React and TypeScript лайкнул мой пост. Да, Стив Кенни. О. Фронтенд мастерс оставил мне вопрос. Congrats. What did you think of the course? Ну, ответить... я просто лайкнул. Ответить что-то конструктивное и развернутое. Или просто сказать, что nice. Ну, пока повременим с этим. Так, и Скотт Моссон, давай зафолловим. Он с 2012 года. Full Stack Music. Next.js курс Up. Да, Full Stack Music, Full Stack AI, Next.js. Intro Next.js Ver 3. Вот этот курсик, да, мы будем? Вот в этой репе. Next.js, да, тусил? В каком году? Он с 16, ну, давно фронтенд мастерс тусит. Next.js, да. Так, ладно. Headless CMS, with Next.js. Интересная тема. Intermediate Next.js, server-side GraphQL, client-side GraphQL with React V2. Нормальная тема, кстати. Я уже с Мишаней Северным разбирал. Full stack TypeScript app with GraphQL. Ну, нормально, интересные курсики у него. И MongoDB. Мне нравится. Так, ну что, погнали в курсик. Watch the курс. А, подожди, давай.
All right, everyone, how's it going?
Давай прочитаем. Next.js is a complete full-stack framework built on the top of React.js. You can use Next.js to create basic blog websites up to full-stack applications and APIs. In this course, you will learn server-side rendering, static site generation, data fetching, building API endpoints, creating pages, and new features in Next.js 30+, 13+, like using the app router, server and client components, and server actions. Нормальная тема. Мне как раз нужен свой блог с комментами на GitHub прикрученными. Так, чуть-чуть разверну камеру. Но еще ремикс, нормальная тема. С Майклом Джексоном и Кенси Дотсом. Ну, их, я думаю, что мы до них попозже доберемся. Так, я скидываю ссылку на курсик в чатик. Так, еще секундочку. Сейчас, секундочку, пару технических моментов. Сейчас я зашарю ссылочку на стрим на свои канальчики. Сейчас, секундочку, пару технических. Чтоб Все заинтересованные лица были уведомлены. О ситуации. Так, ну все. Все формальности соблюдены. Че, погнали? Давайте откроем курс Notes. Забыл, как зовут. Скотт Мосс. Скотт Мосс использует Notion, да, для того, чтобы сопровождать свои воркшопы. И репозиторий на GitHub. Давайте мы его сразу скачаем. Копируем ссылочку. Открываем iTerm. Да, cd фронтенд мастерс. Git clone. И вставляем ссылку. Да, и коды.tvs код. Открываем этот проектик в VS Code. А как называется? Интро, да? Ну вот, открыли. Нажимаем Ctrl-тильду, открываем терминал. Чуть крупнее сделаю терминал. И так, смотрим. Package.json сразу. Ну. Да, ну давайте пока ничего не будем делать. Давайте посмотрим. Превью.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Scott Moss, and welcome to Intro to Next.js. In this course, we're going to cover everything you need to know to get started with the latest version of Next.js. Some of the newer features that have come to the scene are pages.
Так, latest version. Когда курс был запилен? 11 августа 2023 года, год назад. А сейчас Next.js какой версии? Next.js. Так, docs. Так, где версия-то? Installation. О, так. Ну, смотри, Next.js 14.2. На Next.js, а в октябре. То есть, вот видишь, Next.js релиз кандидат. Да? Is now available. This early version allows you to test the latest features before the upcoming stable release. Ну, одна мажорная версия. А что тут? Turbo Pack, Server Actions, Partial Pre-rendering, Next.js Learn. Oh, free course teaching the app router identification database. Ли Робинсон и Тим Ноткинс. Так, понятно, с актуальностью все понятно. Ну ладно, давай.
Layouts, server components, client components, server actions. Honestly, there's just so many to list. I can't wait for you to dive in and check it out yourself. I know by the end of this course, you're gonna have a strong foundation in which you can leverage to become a Next.js expert. Next.js as a framework is really just about combining a bunch of conventions that do things for you automatically where it's supposed to feel magical. Some people like that magical feeling. Some people don't like that magical feeling. I personally like the magical feeling when I know what it's doing and I know what the alternative is. So one of the magical things that they do is that they just hook up the router for you. So you don't have to go figure out and download or even configure a router. You just make files and folders and it's done. So how does that work? Well, it's all based off the file system and the structure inside of our app directory. So basically every single folder that you make in the app directory is going to correspond to a different segment in your router for your app. So an example would be if we had, /app and then we had /dashboard and then /settings, that's going to make a route for our website.com/dashboard/settings. And then to actually create a page that loads up on that segment, all we have to do is create a page component. So a page.js or page.jsx or page.tsx, just a page. It has to be called page. If you've used a previous version of Next, this wasn't the case. So if you use the pages directory, any file that you made in a folder was going to be that route. That's not the case here. In this case, you actually specifically have to call it page in order for it to be a page in that segment. So let's check that out. We already have one. If you look in the app directory, there's a page right on the root. So seeing how this page file is on the root, that means its path is just /. So this will be the home page, right? And we couldn't make another page TSX or JSX or JS in this folder because we couldn't have two home pages and we couldn't have two files with the same names here. So you kind of got to think through how you're working through those conflicts. But let's say we want to make another route here. So let's make a new folder and we'll call it, docs, because we're going to have a docs section where we talk about the docs for our API. So I can say docs, and then I can go in here and then I can say page.tsx. And all I have to do is just export a component that returns some JSX, right? So I'm just going to say const docs page. And I'm just going to make sure that's a default export. All right, and then inside of here, I'm just going to return, not here. Oops. Inside of here, I'm just going to return a div that just says docs page. Right? So now we have our docs page. And now, without having to stop or start anything, I can go right into the browser. I can go into our app. I can say docs, and I get my docs page. And that's all I had to do to make a new route. Very simple, very easy. I didn't have to research a router. I didn't have to learn the router. I didn't have to install the router and set it up. I just made a new file, a new folder and a new file. That was it. It's free. Let's go take a look at the layout TSX that we have here in the app that was generated for us. And if you ever used the earlier version of Next.js, you probably are asking, so where does the app file go? Where I write the app template if I want to do, something globally for the entire app. Where's the root at, basically? Well, layouts kind of serve that purpose. So a layout, like I said earlier, is just a component that wraps other layouts and other pages, right? It's like, oh, I have some common functionality, typically UI, sometimes data, that I want for every single route underneath this layout. So I'm just going to, create a component that does this. In fact, this was such a highly requested feature. If you go back and look at the older version of Next.js and you find the part where they talk about layouts, they basically say, well, here's how you do it yourself, because we don't support it. And it's just like, and it's never a really good solution. It's just like, they're all just trade-offs. Now they figured it out, how to do that. The other biggest complaint was in the older version of Next.js, you could only do data fetching in pages, but if you need to do data fetching in a layout, let's say your layout was, navigation on the left, navigation on the top, and on the top there was you had to show the user's avatar. So you had to do some type of fetching to get the user's information here. But if that wasn't a layout, you couldn't do it on the server side because layouts couldn't do data fetching. So it was like you had to do all this weird workaround in order to get this to work. But now that's not the case. You can do, layouts are treated just like pages. They are first-class citizens. They can do data fetching, and they allow you to share UI. So one rule you have to have in Next.js app router is that you have to have a root layout. But there's many ways you can do it. One way you can do it is the way that we see here, as in there is a layout file immediately in the root of the app file. And this is the root layout. This is like the app.js or JSX or TSX that you would have had in the previous version of Next.js. It's where your whole app gets rendered into. So you kind of need this. So you can see I'm actually using the HTML tag here and the body, and then everywhere where you see children, that's where the pages get rendered, right? So the pages get rendered here. This is also a great place to do anything global. Like I have some global CSS, some font stuff going on here. Don't worry about this metadata thing. We'll talk about that. But essentially, it's just a function. It's just a component that can do whatever it wants, and it renders its children, which are going to be pages. That's it.
Is this a case where root layout is a specially namespaced magic keyword, or it could be like export default function, bar?
Oh yeah, so this name is irrelevant. You can call this whatever you want. Yeah, this is just what they generated with when we did create next app. But yeah.
Но если оно как export default экспортируется как этот модуль, то естественно, что это может быть любым неймом.
Yeah, there's no convention around the name of a component in Next.js. You can call it whatever you want. I just prefer to keep it capital.
Больше makes sense вопрос. А какие допускаются экспорты? Только экспорт default? Или можно еще именованный экспорт использовать?
But yeah, this name doesn't mean anything. You can call this literally anything. But it is a layout. You can see that,
Я думаю, что только по дефолту можно экспортировать, что это одна из конвенций.
Got some CSS here. We got our classes. We're wrapping our children. And as far as like the children, where does this come from? Well, if you look at layout, are there any routes that are children of this layout? As in, are there any folders that are next to it? Yeah, so that means everything in docs, everything in dashboard is going to be rendered here, and any pages next to it. So this includes this page here, right? And just to illustrate that, I can just move this down a little bit, and I can just say, layouts like this, right? And then I can put the children here. So once I put layout there and I go back to our app, there's always going to be layout, right? Oh, that's huge. Oh, there's layout right there. It's always going to be here because it's part of the entire app. It's always here. The other sweet thing about layout is that even though the route changes, the layout never re-renders. It is cached. It doesn't re-render or re-evaluate when you change a route. It stays the same, which is so great for something like a UI. And if you had to do some of this on your own in the previous version of Next, trying to make sure that that doesn't re-render was always a pain. Like you had to do like, memos and it was always a pain to try to do that stuff yourself. So now it doesn't. Layouts just don't re-render. They will always stay on the page no matter what route you go to, which is pretty useful. And then you can have nested layouts, right? So back to our route grouping example, if I wanted my dashboard to have a specific layout to it that my landing page wouldn't have, I would add that here, right? So in this case, I do. My dashboard is probably gonna look different than my landing page would. So I'm gonna add a new layout here in the dashboard group folder. So I'm gonna make a new file and I'm gonna call it layout.tsx. I can make a new dashboard layout. Right, and it's just a function that we export. And the only thing about layouts, you can do whatever you want. You just need to make sure you render the children. Because if you don't render the children, they'll never show through. It'll just only show your layout. So just be sure to do that. So you always want to make sure you have your children prop. Return your div. I'm going to put an H1 here that says dashboard. And a div that has my children. Like that. So now I have my dashboard layout. Now, any children here should be anything that's sibling to this layout, which I don't have, and anything that's a child of it, which in case it is this to-dos. So if I go to /to-dos, I should see this dashboard load up as well.
Каскадом, да,
So
идет.
let's try that.
Всё там.
There we go. So you can see here's the root layout, which nests the dashboard layout, which renders this page. Right? So that's how we're able to nest layouts, because they just reside in folders underneath each other. As a refresher, server components are components that run on the server. They literally execute in the node environment, which means you can do node things. The other thing, though, that you might have thought about, and maybe you didn't know this is how this worked, but because they only execute on the server and they're not in like React's context of change detection and virtual DOM and all that stuff, they don't opt into the same behavior as a regular React component. Do you know what happens when you update a state from a state hook in a React component? Like, what happens to that component? Anybody want to guess? Or why do we even need hooks in the first place? Like, what is that?
To render it again with updated data.
Yeah, exactly. When you call that update state function, it does render the component again with updated data. But like, what does it mean to render again, right? Like, if you really think about it, this looks like a regular JavaScript function, but one, you never call this function, right? React calls the function for you, so that's one thing. And you have no control over when it gets called, because its parent might re-render, which causes this to re-render, right? You don't really get that much control. Yeah, you can use things like memo and stuff like that to prevent it from re-rendering.
Ну, я так
But
понял,
that's because this isn't just like an ordinary JavaScript function. Like,
даже не
you ever try to
intro,
put async in front of
какой-то
this
тизер, да,
and see what happens?
получается.
You can't async await anywhere.
То есть нет смысла особого смотреть. На 12-й минуте я выяснил, да, что нет смысла особо смотреть этот тизер. На, погнали. Тогда к самому курсу. Курс будет состоять из 4 часов на 4,5 часов. Ну, умножая на 3. Так, это вот introduction. Project setup routing. Layouts, styling, data handling, deployment, wrapping up. Так, а какую приложуху-то мы будем делать? Надеюсь, блог, да? Давай, погнали.
All right, everyone, how's it going? Everyone from around the world. My name is Scott Moss, and I'm going to be your instructor today for our version 3 of Next.js, which if you've taken the last version, you know we recently just updated it, but Next.js also just had some really big updates too. So I felt like it was worth, and the updates were substantial enough to do another one versus waiting. So I wanted to get that out, me and the front-end masters team. So
Да, а какого числа была 14 версия-то? Так. В октябре, в конце октября 2023 года. Да, получается. Давненько. Ну-ка, а какие есть курсы? YouTube.com, да? Next.js 14. Кто это у нас? Code Evolution. Purple School. Так, ну-ка давай включим эту штуку, VPN-ку, и обновим. Все равно, да? На русском. JavaScript мастере. Ну, тёлочка. Build and deploy anime app. О, вот этот смазливый, да, парнишка, тут тоже рассказывает. Вот, ну этот-то Тео Усач обязательно должен был со своем Т3. О, Т3 GG бойлерплейте эту тему завязать. Ну, уже успели наснимать, да, материала. По Next.js 14. Ладно, мы фармим фронтенд мастерс. Да, кстати, давайте посмотрим. По поводу воркшопов, не намечаются ли по Next.js 14 чего-нибудь. Не, пока у них не намечается. Next.js Introduction, Next.js вид 4, да, должно быть. Ну-ка, courses. Sorting by date. Пока не намечается. Так, еще раз в воркшопы зайдем. Вот это upcoming. А какие, а где, которые уже были? Воркшопы, которые уже были. Где их посмотреть? View all workshops. Ну, типа, у них нету, да, записи-то воркшопов? Вот, see all. New courses. Давай, вот, new courses. Давай посмотрим. Не, ну, здесь мы уже были. Not intermediate, Next.js. Да, есть курс. Он когда был? Вот в июле. Июля 24 года. Это было 3 недели назад. Ну, это будет следующий наш курс по Learning Path. Или elective это у нас будет. Это у нас будет через один, да? Но я думаю, что мы вот этот сделаем, потом вот этот, а потом уже вернемся к Стиву Кенни. Ладно, хватит тянуть. Давай дальше.
That's what we're doing. Cool. Okay. Well, a little bit about me. My name is Scott. Obviously, I've been an engineer for a little over 10 years now. Before that, I was in the Navy, where I fixed helicopters stationed down in San Diego. It was a beautiful job. I don't know how I got so lucky. But yeah, engineer for almost 10 years now. Worked at tons of companies up and down the Bay. The last engineering job I held was at Netflix. I was a senior engineer there. Did all types of stuff at Netflix. Worked
Нормально, да, сначала с Аудафоном чинил вертолеты, да, а потом сразу в Netflix попал. Интересно.
on the smart TV app. I mean, Netflix lets you do whatever you want, so I did whatever I want. It was really cool. But now currently I'm an investor at a firm in San Francisco where
Инвестор.
my job is basically like Shark Tank. I take pitches all day, like technical pitches. So it's really cool. Do a lot of AI pitches and API DevTool pitches and things like that. But still spend a lot of my free time writing curriculum, writing code, building things on the side, keeping my technical skills sharp. One, because it's just a personal passion of mine, but two, it actually helps me with my job to be up to date on these technologies when I'm talking with these founders. That way I know what they're talking about, and I'm not fooled or tricked or anything like that. So also love things like games, sneakers, basketball, anime, stuff like that. So if you're into some of that stuff and want to connect around any of that, let me know. But other than that, I'm just your typical engineer that just stays up till 4 o'clock in the morning writing code for no reason. So that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, this course it's in the title, right? It's an intro to Next.js V3. We have had so many updates over the last 6 months that have come out to Next.js in the form of Next.js 13. I think when Next.js 13 first came out, there were a lot of like beta features that people just weren't sure if they were going to get, brought into main and the APIs are going to remain the same, but now they're no longer beta. They're part of the actual framework, so we're going to be covering a lot of that. And just to put it out there, Next.js has tons and tons and tons of functionality, features. Like, we just won't be able to cover all of them today. Like, it's just impossible. It would take like a week to cover everything in Next.js. And that's, as you'll see, most of it is actually for like more advanced apps when you go into production and like collaboration and teamwork. But the foundational stuff, that's what we're going to be covering. So you'll have the foundational stuff. Next.js has really good docs, so you can go follow on the docs, and we'll take a look at the docs and go over things like that. But I just want to make sure you have a really good foundation on like pretty much everything you would need for any Next.js app, no matter what you do, and go for it from there. The other caveat is that with Next.js 13, there's a new way to make a Next.js app, and we'll see what that version is. But the previous version, there was an old way to make the app. So if you are part of a team using the old version of Next.js, some of that stuff is not going to be taught here because I'm only teaching the new stuff going forward because that's what the Next.js team is pushing. So we'll talk about some of the older ways, but we won't be demonstrating, and there's no curriculum built around it. But I'm totally down to have a conversation about it. If you have experience working on the older version and you have some questions on how it might relate to the newer version, let me know, and we can go over it. Cool. So a couple things. If you go to the notes, should get you here. It's just So these notes are, honestly, mostly for you all. If you've ever taken my courses, you know that like I just prefer just to hop in the editor and just make mistakes and do it live. That's just kind of my style. I just have to do it that way. I can't like follow along. So these notes are mostly for you all, but everything that we'll be covering will be in here. You see I have two links here. One is just a link to shortcut you to the Next.js documentation, which we'll be referencing. I hope you'll be referencing because again,
Да, Next.js documentation.
there's just so much amount of information in this framework and we're not gonna cover everything. But the other one is the actual repo. So if you click on that, you can go check it out. Highly recommend using this to as a reference for the code that we'll be writing. If you feel like you might be falling behind, if you just want to look ahead, if like however you want to reference it, it's there. It's always going to be there. So take a look at it. I'll be doing everything from scratch in this course, and I'll probably be doing it very similar to what's in the repo, but not exactly one for one, because I'm just random and I just do things differently every time I write code. Like, I don't remember any of this stuff. I just do it again. So that's kind of how my style is. But yeah, so the other thing I just want to talk about is like what I think you would need to know to get the best from this course. So one, having a good understanding of Node.js. So that doesn't mean you need to be an expert at it, but maybe if you've taken an intro course to Node.js, that's probably good enough.
Intro to Node.js. Он рекомендует пройти этот курс, да. Перед тем, как... Но у меня есть в закладках. Естественно, что мы не будем делать эту запятую. Мы будем дальше проходить самонадеянно, полагая, что у нас достаточно знаний по Node.js, чтобы понимать,
or if you just built a Hello World app in Node.js, that's probably good enough. That also includes if you've ever built any front-end app that uses a framework like React or Vue or Svelte, because they all use build tools that are based off Node.js. So that's probably also good enough. And then obviously you need to know JavaScript. I'll be using TypeScript in the course. You do not need to know TypeScript all the time.
Learning path. Ну, JavaScript, кстати говоря, learning path у меня не пройден. Почти совсем. Но только General Kill. Есть такая тема. Это после всего остального. Прямо засяду, займусь, прочитаю вместе с вами книжки. Functional Light JavaScript и прочее, и прочее. Ну, естественно, что Евгения Рая тоже не обойдем стороной.
Types are optional, and I never use them, so you won't even notice it. But I'm just using TypeScript out of the box because it's just easier to work with these days. And then the last thing is, I would say, probably a decent understanding on the difference between like servers and clients and just basic networking with HTTP and kind of how that works. Like, maybe to the point of like, how to make an API call. Like that's it. Anything beyond that, I'm not expecting you to know TCP and WebSockets and, DNS level things. Just like, I know what an API call is. I know what a server is. I know what a client is. Because it's going to get kind of crazy in here when we talk about some of the new features. And I'm very curious how people react to it. Because when I saw some of this new stuff, I was just like, what is going on? So it's gonna be pretty cool. Okay, let's just take a look at the finished app. I didn't focus on style here. It's not gonna win any awards, and that's intentional. We're focused on functionality. But basically, it's a to-do app that's just composed of 3 things. So you have like a home page where you can put all your home stuff. We have a documentation page where we can write documentation about an API that we're gonna have. And then the actual app, which is just a to-do app that allows you to like create to-dos and it just lists them here for you. It's basically it. So it seems simple on the surface, but if you've ever built a to-do app, you know, I mean, you can expand that to create some complicated, I mean, you can make Evernote. That's an app. I don't know how Evernote is a thing, but it's a $1 billion company. So, you know, it happens. So we'll basically be building this using the latest features from Next.js. Also, we have a full stack course that I teach using Next.js.
Давай посмотрим. Build an IE-powered full-stack Next.js App v3. Ну вот его, кстати, можно пройти после Intermediate. Можно даже составить roadmap. Да, по порядку. Ну, то есть запомним вот эту штуку. Но я думаю, что перейдем в Скотт Мосса. Да, вот сейчас мы проходим вот этот. Потом мы пройдем где Intermediate, да, а потом вот этот курс пройдем.
And this will literally transition right over to that. So in that course, we will actually build a sophisticated, nicely designed, ready to go production app that like you can deploy. And hopefully my goal with that one is that you'll be able to use that app every day. It'll be something that you actually enjoy. So that's a more ambitious one, but you need to know this foundation before you can do that. And that course is a lot faster. We'll be moving a lot faster in that course. We talked about this already, but the last thing here is just like how to best take this course. So like I said, I'm going to be giving some high-level overview about some topic. You might see me break away and just like demonstrate some code about that topic unrelated to the app that we're making. And then it'll be like, okay, now I'm ready to like apply this to the app that we're making. So basically what you can do is you can listen as I'm doing those first two steps where I'm giving an overview while I'm demonstrating how to use it in the code. And then for the third step where we actually apply it, you can follow along on your machine and, you know, copy it or do it your own way. Or just feel free to follow along whenever I'm in the editor, but I will be doing a lot of code that I'm just throwing away just for demonstration purposes. But I will let you know which code is like, you know, I'm just testing this out, I'm just showing you versus like, no, this is for the app. You should pay attention to this. So you don't have to worry about that. I think it's important to talk about the history of Next.js and kind of how we got here.
Да, давайте я вам пришлю в чатик. Заметки по курсу и репу, с которой мы будем учиться.
Especially if you're new to engineering, if you just graduated a boot camp, like there's some stuff going on here. So, because you might ask yourself like, well, isn't React a framework? Why do I need a framework for a framework, right? It's kind of weird, but the interesting thing is that like, if you go to the React documentation, they actually don't recommend using React by itself anymore. They actually recommend using something like Next.js, which is huge. That just happened this year. So they recommend using something like Next.js or any of the other frameworks.
Чё, серьезно, что ли? А где это написано? Ну-ка. Не рекомендуют использовать React в чистом виде. А где? А, типа вот здесь, да. Unless you put components together, but it doesn't prescribe how to do routing and data fetching to build an entire app with React. We recommend a full stack React framework like Next.js or Remix. Get started with the framework. Gatsby, Expo, Universal Android in iOS and web apps with a truly native UI. It provides an SDK for React Native and makes the native parts easier to use to create a new Expo project run. Ну, интересная штука.
But anyway, the history of React and Next.js, as you know or may not know, React is just basically a library that was created by Facebook a long time ago, 2013, 2014, and then eventually picked up steam to become pretty much the #1 JavaScript framework out there. You know, although I do think there are faster, better frameworks out there, I think React is probably still the most popular one because it just has the biggest community and everything is pretty much based off of the learnings that React taught everyone. So like everyone just took that and improved it, had their own opinion. So React's probably gonna be the most popular one going forward because the community is just crazy. But it's really just like a library. It's not really a framework in my opinion. It's just a way for you to build UIs. Like it's not complete. Like if you ever use something like Angular, where Angular is like, all right, you can build these UIs with these components. Also, here's a router. Also, here's a testing framework.
Ну да. Давайте вспомним еще статью Мартина Фаулера, да, Inversion of Control. Вот это, да. Вот смотри, видишь. Inversion of control is the key of what makes a framework different to a library. Да? Да, ссылочку на статью тоже кидаю.
Also, like, here's everything that you ever need to do everything in Angular. You don't need to install anything else. Yeah, React's not that. React's just like, here's how you make components. That's it, right? They don't even have, you know, a complete state management system. Like you would have to install something else like a Redux or something to do that. They definitely don't have a router. You would have to install a router. So, and that's really cool because it allows you to have that flexibility of like leveraging things from the community. But when you're a big company with a big team, the last thing you want to do is like go shopping for open source and, you know, putting your company's resources backed on like some random person, you know, living in a basement, working on a router. Like you want it to be backed by like a big company. So you want that assurance. So that's why like bigger companies would use something like Angular. So then, you know, that kind of created the need for something like Next.js, where you needed a framework for the framework that like kind of brought all these things in. And I think what kind of expedited that was the fact that there were a lot of advancements on how you can render React. So you can render it on the client, you can render it on the server. We're going to talk about some of those things. But building that infrastructure to do that was incredibly difficult. I remember when server-side React came out and I was on a team that had to implement that. It took us months. It took us months to figure out how to do it. Whereas like now we get it for free. So that's kind of like where Next.js is and why it came to the scene. And now it's like probably the most heavily adopted, most useful React framework out there. And you know, there are others that kind of compete with Next.js and do something similar, but I think Next.js just has like the full package. Yeah. But yeah, that's the history of React, Next.js. Also to mention that Vercel is the company behind Next.js, formerly Zeit. It's now called Vercel. They're a hosting platform. And you know, they have a team dedicated on working on Next.js, and you know, I think they're doing a really good job. But so are all the other frameworks out there. I think all the other frameworks are doing really great. It's just, yeah, this company is crushing it in my opinion. Yeah, any questions about that history of React, Next.js, frameworks in general? You know, like if you just went back 10 years, it wasn't too long before we didn't even have frameworks. You know, I remember Backbone.js was the first framework, but before that, everybody just used jQuery. And yeah, like part of me wants to go back to that, but the other part of me is just like, man, there was no order there. You know, but it was also very simple. It was a simple time. So I don't know, but there are some really cool frameworks out there that kind of feel like that. I like Quick.js. That one kind of reminds me of the jQuery days, but with more structure and speed and things like that. So that's a really cool framework to check out.
Типа, спасался на Quick. Мишка Hevery, creator. Previously Angular. Но это серьезно. Quick надо тоже раскурить. Quick нормальная тема.
Out. I think we have a Quick.js course here at Frontend Masters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Mishko.
Misko, yeah, the creator of Quick.js, also the creator of Angular. Very smart guy. Let's just dive right into the most craziest thing about this framework and all the things that hopefully we have a lot of questions on and stuff like that. But I'm just gonna dive right in and kind of talk about it, because I think everything going forward is based off this foundation. So I'm just gonna introduce it early on. So there's really not a lot of context right now, but you will build the context later. And that is gonna be server components. So React server components is a new paradigm introduced in React 18 and has been adopted by Next.js 13. And basically the whole new premise of React.js 18 and Next.js 13 with React server components is trying to address some of the earlier issues we've had with different types of rendering modes in the framework. So before we get into that, let's just talk about like some of these different types of rendering modes. So the one you might be familiar with the most is called a SPA or SPA, single page application. This is just like you did create React app and you just built, you know, something with like React router or some other HTML based router and you built an app. That's a single page application. You just have one index.html page in the browser, and every time you do routing, you're just switching out that div with another component. But the HTML page never goes back to the server and reloads or refetches. So it's just a single page that switches out components based off of a router.
Да, кстати, по поводу Single Page Application. Есть очень хорошая статья у Kenzie Dotsa. Kenzie Dots. SPA. Да, вот это. The Web Next Transition. Multi-page apps. Вот, single page apps. Да, и вот он. Подходит плавненько к ремиксу. Да. Короче, вот рекомендую статью вот эту. Статья Kenzie Dotsa про SPA.
And this is really cool. This was all the crave and the rave, rave back then because, it was quick. Routing was fast. You didn't have to worry about having a server. You can put it on the CDN, different things like that. But it had problems. The browser had to download all the JavaScript in order for people to see things, not only to see things, but to interact with those things. You also had problems with like crawlers. So like anything like, if you wanted to see if you paste a link to a single page application in something like Facebook or Twitter, it might've been hard for those, to see those previews pop up because those crawlers didn't know how to interpret JavaScript and it wasn't gonna wait for the JavaScript. So you just wouldn't see a preview. And I remember it was a time where even Google, was not good at crawling single page applications. So, you had all these companies that would take your app, pre-render it, spit out the HTML, and then give that to a crawler. Or even crazier, you do it dynamically. You create your own server, detect that a crawler is on my website. Don't show them the single page application, show them the pre-rendered version instead. Like that was a thing. I remember having to make that. So it was pretty nuts. So to address that, server-side rendering came out, right? Server-side rendering is basically kind of the same thing, but with a different first step. So instead of rendering everything on the browser and having the JavaScript be downloaded, instead, the initial render of that page or that component happens on the server. So we're going to take that component, render it to HTML, send that HTML to the browser so it shows up instantly without any JavaScript download. And then while that is being shown in the background, download the JavaScript and then have the client version of that same component take over, which allows interactivity. And that swap happens so fast that you don't see it, but it does happen. So that way people can see the page immediately, crawlers can get the information that they want immediately, but you still have to wait for the JavaScript to download in order to be interactive. So we did solve the problem of seeing things quickly and solving the SEO and crawler's problem, but we didn't solve the problem of, well, what if I want to click on that form as soon as I see it? Oh, well, you can't, because you gotta wait for the JavaScript to download, and depending on your internet connection and how big the JavaScript was, it could take a long time. So then people got really fancy with like, well, we'll do code splitting. So we'll split the bundle up, and then we'll do dynamic import. So we only.
То есть он клонит к тому, что сервис-сайт рендеринг — это некое промежуточное решение общей нерешенной проблемы.
Import code that like, and then it's like, yeah, but are we really solving the problem here? So now this brings us to React server components. Server components, what tries to solve some of these problems. So React server components is basically a new way of doing server-side rendering. That it's almost like server-side rendering, except for the fact that there is no JavaScript associated with the component sent to the browser. So you could actually run a React server component entirely without any JavaScript at all. But the caveat is you can't have any interactivity in your component either. You still need client components for that. But by having these server components, this allows us to do like all the data fetching necessary for a page. Imagine you have a blog page that needs to get content from a CMS. You can do that on the server while the component is rendering and send that back to the client without any JavaScript added to it. So there's no need to wait for an entire bundle of JavaScript to download just to see anything or interact. And if there is some interaction on there, well, that interaction, that specific component that has interaction, let's say it's a form, only that component can be a client component. So therefore, the rest of the page doesn't have to wait for that bundle to download to interact with that form just so you can like move around. So things are being what they call progressively enhanced. So we're choosing what to download at what specific time based off what needs versus like, oh, we can only download everything at one time, even though this whole page doesn't need any interaction, but this one component does. Where now it's like, we don't have to do that anymore. We can just like, yeah, just download the whole page. And then when this thing needs interaction, we can download that progressively. We can actually stream it. So that's kind of like what React Server Components is. Next.js has taken that and built it into the framework. And it's actually pretty cool. It's also slightly confusing if you haven't worked in like a framework that switches between client-side and server-side JavaScript all in one repo, and it all looks the same. So, it's not like, well, this is Express over here, and this is React, so I can clearly tell which one's back end and which one's front end. Okay, no, that's not gonna happen anymore. You are gonna be writing React components, and they could be working on the back end or working on the front end or both. So like having to know which version is doing what is kind of confusing, but we're gonna walk through how best not to get confused through some of that. So, and then I'll just talk about a little bit about the difference between React Server Components versus server-side rendering. But basically, server-side rendering performs that, it only does server-side rendering on that initial load, right? So, but then if you try to go back to it, it's just going to be client-side routing. So you kind of lose the benefit of that. Whereas with React Server Components, every time you go to it, it's going to render on the server. So you always get that benefit of never needing JavaScript. This makes the client-side bundle predictable and cacheable, which is really hard to do if the bundle size is always changing. Now you don't have to worry about it changing when you add new pages because those pages don't contribute to the bundle size because they're server components. So this like makes performance basically easier to do. And yeah, it's not all perfect, but for the time being, I think it's a really good experiment what the React team is doing and what the Next.js team is doing. And we'll see if it sticks. If you ever built something in, let me see, what's an equivalent? Like Elixir, Phoenix, PHP, Ruby on Rails. it's basically that, where you're just doing all the logic for a component executing on a server and not on a client. So yeah, that was a long spiel. I don't expect you to remember and know all of that. We're gonna go through a lot of this in examples, but I wanted to give you that primer. So I'm gonna start mentioning some of these words as we write the code, and I want you to know what they are. Cool, any questions?
I got kind of a weird one.
Yeah.
So like working with like Hotwire for Rails before, like, you know, the HTML over the wire ones that mostly use WebSockets under the hood. Is that what RSC is doing too, or is it?
So I know React 18 implements streaming of the HTML to the browser. I think Next.js has its own approach where they actually just pre-render it instead of streaming it, the HTML, but you do have the ability to like stream data to it. So there is no WebSockets implemented here. There is no real-time component of like streaming HTML like Hotwire or like what Elixir and Phoenix, like what they do, especially in Next.js. They just do the pre-rendering, but I don't think there's anything stopping you from doing it if you wanted to. But I think Next.js just does the pre-rendering instead of like doing the streaming by default. But you know, great question. But it is as far as like what you get is pretty much the same thing.
Окей.
Now that we're all
Че, давайте перекур. Перекур. Пятнадцать минут. Во, давай вот эту тему посмотрю. А, нет, это... Ну, как раз 18 минут, нормально.
All right, thank you, Two. From Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, please welcome Isabel Nunez. Thank you, Isabel. Your next competitor, top 8 at the Olympia tonight. Well, from Seville, Spain, please welcome Sandra Colorado Acal. All right, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Lily. Your next competitor, 6th place right here on this stage last year, from Orlando, Florida. Please welcome Andrea Horenko.
Жопу не растопырила, да? Минус 1 балл.
Thank you, Andrea.
За наколки минус полбалла. Жопку растопырила. Плюс 1 балл. Грим неровно лежит. Минус полбалла.
Thank you, Courtney.
Ну, стрика вот эта сухая. Кортни Ли Чун Хуян. О, вот это плюс 2 балла. Плюс 2,5. Плюс 3 балла. Короче, за сухость плюс 1 балл.
Thank you,
За
Hayu.
позирование плюс 1 балл.
Please
Плюс
welcome
3 балла.
Anne Marie
Плюс 1
Gobiel.
балл. Профиль, конечно, это не ее
Thank you, Anne
сильное
Marie.
место. Миниатюрненькая.
Thank you, Joanna. Since inception. Tonight, she makes her Wellness International debut from Toledo, Brazil. Please welcome Franciele Meadows.
Но это похоже победительница.
Thank you. Born in Brazil, now residing in Las Vegas, Nevada. Please welcome Bruna Seredich. All right, thank you, Bruna. All right, our ladies in place. Let's send it down to the judges.
I need number 1, Amanda. Number 5, Andrea. Number 6, Courtney. And number 9, Johanna. Okay, ladies. Quarter turn to the right. Quarter turn to the right. Quarter turn to the right. And face forward. Okay, let's do 180, face that back wall. Now walk halfway back and hold it when you get there. Face forward and walk it back. Okay, thank you very much. You take a step back to either side. I need number 4, Lily. Number 8, Anne Marie. Isla. Number 3, Sandra. Francielle and Sandra switch. I'm sorry, I'm right next to you. Sorry, my fault. 8 and number 3 switch. Number 3, Sandra. Lily and Issa switch. And then Lily and Bruna switch. Okay, ladies, quarter turn to the right. Quarter turn to the right. Quarter turn to the right. And face forward. Okay, ladies, let's do a 180, face that back wall. Now walk halfway back and hold it when you get there. Face forward and walk it back. Thank you very much. Take a step back to either side. That concludes the confirmation round, Bob.
All right, thank you, Sandy. How about a big hand, folks, for all 11 of our international wellness competitors. We'll see our ladies back a little bit later in the program. first place award, Mr. Paul Marchinaris, representing Celsius, our title sponsor. Paul, please take the first place award and the title of 2024 Arnold Classic Wellness Champ 2-year winner, Francielli Meadows. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Let me just ask you a quick question. I mean, what is the difference in training for this versus the bikini competition or the fitness competition or whatever? No, because you all have such fantastic thighs and everything else. So, you know what I'm saying? It's just that I'm sitting down here and I'm drooling. So, I mean, it's like a, yeah. Sorry, Hedda. But in any case, so anyway, so tell me exactly what's going on with the training.
First, I can't believe I'm here in front of my biggest bodybuilding idol. I dreamed with this moment. I'm very emotional because in 2020 I was here fighting for my pro card and I won. And today I'm here in front of you. It's a dream.
Thank you.
I think the wellness train a little more legs and glutes. For example, I train in 3 times a week, legs, glutes, and the upper body 2 times a week. And I think the wellness train a little more glutes and legs.
Fantastic. Keep up the great work. Let's give a big hand, and let's give all of them a big hand for their great, great achievement. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, ladies, let's get everybody in towards the center, please. All right, congratulations, ladies.
Ничего, ну да.
All right, let's stay. Francielli, stay right there in the center.
Очевидно. В одну калитку всех вынесла.
All right, there she is, folks.
Ну чё, погнали дальше.
Experts on server components. Let's talk about the number 1 feature in Next.js, and then we'll write some code, is basically the routing. So I have, some notes here that kind of talk about routing, but, we can go over this. So I'm just going to open my editor, and we're just going to start working on our app. So I think the
Warp. У меня, кстати, тоже установлен Warp. Warp — это такой терминальчик, в который встроен AI. И можно что-нибудь у него спросить. И что он работает. Update now. Да? Ну и в день можно делать. Как это выключить? Talk to your computer in another language and ask Warp AI to help you with complex tasks. Start typing a question for a task like on the my recent git commit or help me connect instance. Ну-ка давай. Help me with Next.js app. О, нормальненько так. Да, смотри, что он творит. Нормальная тема, да? ПВД. А как обычный терминал сказать? Как обычный терминал запустить? Вот так вот, да? Ну-ка. ПВД. А лимит на запросы? Что, они убрали лимит на запросы? Так. Давай. Show me directories in this folder. Enter. Please let me know. Okay. Go in intro v3. Давай, сейчас скажем в какую репу. Фронтенд мастерс. Фронтенд мастерс. Next.js v3. And open VS Code. Чё, серьезно? Охренеть. Нормальная тема. Ну давай, погнали. Что он будет делать?
First thing we want to do is, before we, get in there and get busy with the routing, let's just get everything set up. That way we can start actually working on this app. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a new repo here.
Да-да-да, ссылочку на warp.
Let me see. Actually, one of the best ways to get started is to use create React app. The problem with that though is that you just want to be locked into a certain version. I'm sorry, not create React app, create Next app. The problem with that though is that I want to be locked into a certain version with this course going forward to make sure it's backwards compatible. So just keeping that in mind, if you're following along, whatever version we download, what create.
Видите, у него автодополнение тоже есть. Это Oh my Z Shell плагин.
React app, that's the version you want to make sure you have going forward. Otherwise, future versions might break this course. But anyway, I'm just going to type npx. If you don't know what npx is, it actually comes installed with Node. It's basically a way for you to run global CLIs without having to download those CLIs. So npx and then create Next app like this.
Make sure you're using at least Node version 18. Ну вот, а если бы этот Скотт Моус смотрел Мишаню Северного, то это чувак, который женат на тяночке и который ведет learning path по TypeScript, то он бы пользовался... Чем бы он пользовался? Ну-ка. Вольтой. Он бы пользовался вольтой. Вольта, эта штука позволяет обеспечить the same version of Node.js ensure everyone in your project has the same tools without interfering with their workflow. Нормальная тема. Там в package.json указываешь версии ноды, и для этого проекта используются эти версии.
I'm just going to say at latest, which is going to give me the latest. We'll see what version that resolves to, and that's the version you want to make sure you have. If you're taking this course after this recording, make sure you have this version. We'll talk about it. And then I can put an optional folder name here. I'll just say intro v3 app.
Так, ну мы уже скачали репу-то. Нам делать то же самое. Так, ну. Так, закроем пока. Dota 2. Так, что делаем? ls. CD фронтенд мастерс. ls mkdir Next.js ls move intro Next.js to Next.js ls Next.js. Это закрываем. Cd Next.js npx npx create next app 13.4.5 intro v3 app. Конечно, давай. Давай, погнали.
And I'll do that. And then now it's going to give you this prompt of like different configurations you want to use. So asking me to use TypeScript, I'm going to say yes, I love TypeScript. ESLint for sure. Tailwind, yes. Source directory. So by default, Next.js works on the root of this directory. If you want to put all that into a folder called source, you can do that. I'm going to say no. Use the app router. We'll talk about the app router, but yes, definitely use the app router. Would you like to customize the default import aliases? Don't worry about that right now. I'd say no.
Давай. Все запомнили. Давай. TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind, no, app router. Yes. Customize default, no. Все, погнали, да?
No, and then it's just going to install everything.
So is Tailwind kind of becoming like the standard of using?
I hate to say it, but yeah. And the reason I hate to
say it.
Well, some inline styling. It's so
yeah, I know. The reason I hate to say it is because I personally just don't like writing tons of CSS classes all in my components. And for the longest, I just did not understand or like Tailwind. I didn't know why people use it. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I would just rather just use a component library. I don't know, that already has style components and then just edit those styles with inline styling that I need. But I've gotten to this point where like I've realized I was doing more editing of component libraries to fit the style that I need. And it was probably faster for me to start with components that didn't have any style and add the style that I needed. So then I found myself writing my own CSS. And then I was like, well, I don't want to write my own CSS. This is gross. Like, there's got to be a CSS library out there. And then it was Tailwind. But even then, I still didn't stick to it. I think what changed my mind is I had the wrong idea of it. I thought Tailwind was just like a CSS library, like a Bootstrap. But in reality, it's a JavaScript library that generates CSS dynamically. And that was when I was like, oh, wait, this is really powerful. So that plus me learning about like headless components, which are components that have functionality but no styling associated with it, kind of solved my problem. So I can get the functionality of these components that look like crap and then just add Tailwind to it, and it was great. So yeah, I would say it's pretty much the standard at this point. If you like this style of styling, you know, obviously there's other different types of styling. We'll talk about some of them. But if you like using CSS classes, it's basically free. So you just got to learn Tailwind, right? You know, but they do a good job of making sure the class names match the property names in CSS. So it's almost intuitive. So you kind of get the hang of it really quick. You know, let's just go check out what we got. So I'm going to open this up in my VS.
Мне вот лень учить Tailwind. Вот эти вот классы задрачивать. Может быть, оно и неплохо, но, блин, вообще очень сильно в ломы этот Atomic CSS учить. Потому что его, ну, в пэтах юзать. Хер знает. А в команду внедрять, так, ну это всем учить придется.
Code editor. I got a lot of things going on there. Oh, actually, let me cd into it first. How about that? So intro v3, what do I call it? App. And now I'm gonna open this. So we get a lot of things here, but the first thing I want to check out is just like everything that got installed. So if you head to the package JSON, which if you don't know is just the file that keeps track of all of our dependencies in our node project. And we can take a look at the dependencies.
Да, давай посмотрим, что там установилось. Success. Не, мы не будем устанавливать глобально ничего. Да, и типа open last project in VS Code. Он поймет. О, ничего себе. Так, а как было по-английски только что? Только что. Just now. Open. Configurated project just now in VS Code. As per the previous interaction, we tried navigating to the frontend masters intro Next.js v3 and opening VS Code. Let me attempt to open VS Code with the mentioned directory path. А какой мы? У нас intro v3 app. Так. Cancel. Давай. Open. Created. Тоже не то. А у нас нет этой директории. У нас этой директории нету.
Field here and see a few things. The most important one is that we see Next. So Next itself is a dependency in which we download, and you can see that we resolved to 13.4.5.
Come on. Мы же вроде не эту команду устанавливали. Мы же вот 13, 14, 4, 5. Мы же вот эту команду делали.
So if you are following along, if you're watching this later and you have troubles with any errors, it's probably because you did the latest command and got a different version. So what you can do is you can just say, instead of what we did, which was at latest, you can just do at 13.4.5.
Да камон, я уж вот
Just to make sure you have the exact same version that we're using right now,
Только что
since it might be a later version in the future. So
только
you can do that.
только что так сделал. Вот вы же вот видите. Вот видите? npx create next app 13.4.5. Вот в этот фолдер. Он мне еще типа говорит, типа новая есть версия. Available. А в итоге проинсталлировал вот эту поебень. Да, add folder to workspace. Давай вот эту. Так. Ну вот в этой 13.4.4 версия. Ну ладно, чё.
That, hit enter, you'll pretty much get the same thing. So we have that. You can see that we opted in for the ESLint things. So we have all the linting stuff. We get some types set up because we asked for TypeScript. Auto prefixer, which is pretty much needed by Tailwind. Post CSS also needed by Tailwind. Because Next.js sits on top of React, we get all the React goodies. Tailwind itself, and then because I opted in for TypeScript, I get TypeScript. We also get a few commands here. So we get a dev command, which we'll be using to develop with locally. Gives us like fast refresh, hot reload, you know, a server to serve, all the really cool things. The build and start command is for production. This is where we'll build the actual app and then we can start it in production. You almost will never use this locally unless you're testing to see if it works in production. And then the lint command does exactly what you think it does. It lints. So, and I'm going to ignore the linter today. So if like red squigglies give you anxiety, you're about to have a lot of anxiety today because I'm pretty much going to ignore it. So yeah. And then, yeah, everything else is pretty standard. And you can see it also set up the configurations for a lot of these things. So it's set up the post CSS config. It's set up the Tailwind config with our paths to our app already configured. Some custom stuff here for their initial app that you'll see in a minute. If you opted in for TypeScript, you can see TypeScript is already set up. We got some alias paths, all that good stuff. So pretty much good to go. We also have this next config. We'll talk about that. But the most important one to look at is this app folder. So this app.
О, смотри, у него какие настройки настроены, да? Чтоб типа гид можно было видеть директорию. А у меня вот что-то не настроено, чтобы гид было видно. Давай посмотрим, как это исправить. Бита я удалил. Ну-ка, давай спросим вот этот. Давай. How to set visible git directory in VS Code. Ладно, что, серьезно, что ли? Че, серьезно? Охренеть. Files exclude. Ставим false. И получаем папочку git. Охренеть. Полезная штука, да?
App folder, if you remember, there was an option when I did create next app. It was like, do you want to use?
Так, это мы next config, да, открыли? Он смотрит next config. Пустой.
Use the app router, or no? It was like yes or no, and I said you should probably pick yes on this. This is the new version of Next.js that I was talking about, right? Like if we head over to the Next.js documentation here, I'm gonna blow this up. You can see here on the side there's a drop down for pages router and app router, right? We are using the app router. This is what's new in 13. And we'll talk about that in literally just a second, but
Using app router, using pages router, using app router, using pages router.
this is what we want to opt into. And the way that reflects in the repo is that there is a folder called app. This is, you actually have to have a folder called app in order to opt into this. So yeah, and then once you look in here, you'll see a couple things, something called a page, something called a layout. If you've never seen a TSX file, that's just the TypeScript version of a JSX file. That's all it is. It's nothing crazy. So if you know JSX and JavaScript, then you know how to use TSX because it's the same thing, but TypeScript. So, which, like I said, I probably won't be using any types at all. Have a CSS file and then like, you know, a favicon. So the next thing I want to do is I want to start this. So to start this, like I said, we're going to use the dev command. So we can just say npm run dev. So run that dev script.
npm ruin dev.
And you'll see that it's going to start it on a port. It tried to use 3000 in my case. I already have something running on 3000, so it went to 3001. I can just command click on this and open it up. And
Да, сделаем то же самое. В варпе. Сиди. Не будем делать это в варпе. Здесь сделаем npm run dev. О. Красота.
you should see something like this. So this is the stock Next.js scaffold app that they give you out the gate. Everyone should see the same thing, unless they change it in a later version and you're looking at this later and it doesn't look like this. But this is what you get by default on this version. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And it just, everything here just kind of links to their documentation so you can check it out. But it's a great starting point. One last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new file on the root, call it .prettierrc. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to hit save. And
Это очень хороший совет от Брайана Холта. Нормальная тема.
And have everything be auto-formatted with ESLint and Prettier. And Prettier.
Это, короче, такой вот конфиг. Сейчас найду. Вот. Prettier require config флажочек true, что оно без него не применяет. Форматирование. Ну-ка. Вот, видишь, расставила семиколонцы. А как, я забыл, кстати, расшифровывается RC на конце. Ну-ка, давай спросим. How translate abbreviation on the end of the name of the file prettier.rc. Чё, серьезно, что ли? Enter the file name. Prettier.rc stands for run commands. The contents of configuration file Prettier.rc is configuration file for Prettier code formatter. The Prettier.rc contains settings. Oh, the rc suffix is in the file names like Prettier.rc, bash.rc, and stint.rc traditionally stands for run commands. Че, серьезно, что ли? Or runtime configuration, indicating that these files are used for configure how certain tools or program run. Блин, четкая вообще тема. Охренеть.
It won't work unless you have a Prettier.
Да, я забыл сказать, что вот эти конфиги, они работают, потому что в VS Code установлен Prettier вот этот плагин. Ну, вот. Поэтому работают эти конфиги автоматически. Иначе пришлось бы запускать CLI-ку, прописывать эту команду в package.json и запускать CLI-ку. Как и слит.
Configuration on your root. And I also like to have my single quotes. I hate double quotes. And I also don't like semicolons, so I'm turning those off. You don't have to have this.
Не, давай тоже сделаем. А чё бы нет? Мне обычно похер. Вот. Чтобы ненавидеть семиколонсы. Ну, давай. Single quote true. semicolons, false, да. И давай вот смотри. Ну-ка. А почему? А почему? Непорядок. Ну, поменяем просто имя файла, да, чтобы, может быть, эти настройки переприменить. Видишь, он перестал это делать. Да? Перестал форматировать. И сейчас их вернем. Так. Все равно semicolons. Print semicolons false. Ладно.
This is only because my VS Code is looking for this. My prettier ESLint plugins inside my VS Code are looking for this file in order for it to work. Yours might be set up differently, so you can add it. It won't change the functionality or anything on your app. It just allows me to get formatting when I hit save, which is something that I cannot live without at this point. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the routing basics. So.
Так, ну что, братва, давайте на этом пока все на сегодня. Да, благодарочка за тусовку. Ну и встретимся на следующей части. Уже так по убористее, по сфокусированию. Без запятых. Ну вот, ну, что? Всем счастливо.